Hey, LinkedIn, and welcome to Business Unusual. This is a live show where we talk about the changing nature of work. I am Susie Jackson. I'm a news editor at LinkedIn, coming to you live from my home in New York City. On today's show, we want to talk about personal finance. It is a time of immense struggle and challenge around the world. In the US, unemployment sits at 13%. And even as the country starts to reopen and people return to work, there is still a lot of uncertainty. Very little feels secure right now. For people who have their jobs, pay cuts have become common. For the graduating class of 2020, job prospects can feel elusive. As we see in this chart from mobile bill payment company Doxo, based on their data, 3 in 5 Americans are worrying about paying the bills. Many are feeling distressed over auto loans and mortgages, and 43% are worried about the cost of health insurance. To talk about the economic uncertainty and help us to consider strategies for dealing with our own unique financial situations, I wanted to bring on two financial experts to the show today. Keisha Blair is a senior policy advisor for the Government of Canada and the author of Holistic Wealth. And Peter Lazaroff is the co-chief investment officer at Plancorp and Plan and the author of Making Money Simple. I'd like to welcome them to the show right now. Thank you two for joining me.
Hi, Susie. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
It's such a tough time for everyone globally right now. Keisha, I want to start with you. The COVID crisis has brought us much more awareness of each other's financial situations and particularly financial hardships. I'm seeing groups spring up online to talk about stimulus payments, to ask very frank questions, to reveal personal details about financial struggles. I'm wondering that there's extreme pain right now, but are you seeing this lead to any more open conversations about personal finance that are actually good for the long term?
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's a great question because you're right. When this whole crisis started, I think it started, if everyone remembers correctly, it started with the panic buying and everybody rushing out to buy stuff that they thought they would need. And then people stocked up on items that they thought they would need. And then the jobs crisis came afterwards. And so people started losing jobs right after they had shelled out so much money for items that they stocked up on. And so it has been a chain link reaction. And so that's why we've seen the conversation in forums and in groups about personal finance, because everyone has realized now that things can pop up, crisis can set in almost immediately, and we're left vulnerable and we're left alone in terms of trying to figure out what to do next.
Yeah, I feel like there used to be kind of a shame associated with being really honest and open with your finances. Are you finding that drop away and room for education or more vulnerability to creep in?
I think that room has opened up quite a bit. And in terms of the financial discussions, it's also become more rounded and more holistic. So people are linking the finances with mental health aspects, which is great because they're so interlinked. And people are linking it to larger systemic issues like the pay gap for women and with financial empowerment for women, financial abuse, topics that we never talked about. They were taboo. And so I find the conversations now rounded about money, and I'm liking where that's going, because we need to figure out, how our mental capacity affects or how our mental health affects our money decisions, as well as other factors in the workplace, such as the pay gap and other things that we face, in our daily lives.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And talking through different difficult decisions, Peter, I'm curious, what is your take for people in the stream who may have lost their jobs, who are looking for work, who have taken a pay cut? How do you recommend that they prioritize their financial response?
Well, it's really a tricky situation because this came out of nowhere largely. And I would say in aggregate, most employees were not prepared for a crisis like this. And so if you're having financial hardship, particularly if you've lost your job, your best hope is that you have some emergency savings. However, we know that at least 1/3 of people don't have $1,000 to cover an unexpected expense. So let's start from the position that you didn't have anything saved, tucked away for a rainy day. The best thing you can do, hopefully you qualify for the rebates that were part of the CARES Act. Perhaps you have a tax refund that you can lean on. There are a lot of debt issuers, whether that's credit cards or mortgage, student loans, that you can call and ask for a delay in payment, or for a lot of people are offering payment holidays, just to miss a month or two of payment. And I know even Discover had mentioned that the re-enrollment rate for their payment holidays has drastically fallen. So a lot of people took advantage of that at the onset and are now feeling a little bit more confident. And we saw that in the jobs numbers. Unemployment is still very high. And I think even what that doesn't capture sometimes is that people may have a job, but they don't have the job that they were in prior, or that is the type of job they really want to be in. So if you're feeling uncertain about where you are, the most important thing to do is to try to get a snapshot financially of what you are doing. And so I put some free resources out at wealthworksheets.com, where you can just take a net worth snapshot, a cash flow snapshot. You can also outline some of your goals. Just try to get a sense of where are you today. And then that will give you a little bit better sense of where you can draw on to make ends meet in the meantime, as well as the type of things you can be looking to do going forward to make sure that you're in a stable position.
All right, so good advice. Ask your lenders, ask the questions. Everyone knows that we're in a difficult situation. Ask the question and see what the answer might be. For you in the stream, I want to welcome you. This is Business Unusual. This is the show where we are talking about the changing nature of work. We are diving into your questions about personal finance today. I have hellos from Natalie in Canada. So Keisha, there's another Canadian for you watching today. Mario from Ohio, Alfred from Hollywood. Welcome back to you, Alfred. Thomas from Florida, Faye from Oregon. And Oscar in the stream says personal finance is key in crisis times. We're talking here about being more open with our financial situations. In the stream, if you feel comfortable, tell us what you're doing. Talk to me, talk to each other. What's been working for you? Have you been asking your lenders these questions? Has it been helpful? Let us know. We're going to get to as many of your questions and comments today as we can. Keisha, I want to go back to you for a moment. I've heard you talk about the importance of developing a financial identity. Can you talk to us about that? And for those who are able to invest right now, how do you make sure that identity is resilient? We just saw this crisis come out of nowhere. How should we be planning for the next crisis?
Yeah, so I talk about having a personal financial identity a lot in my book, Holistic Wealth, because most of us transition into adulthood not having gained a sense of our own personal financial identity. We graduate out of university, and that first home, the wedding, the honeymoon, we all make these decisions, with a spouse or significant other. And so we transition into adulthood being influenced by someone else and being influenced by our past, lives with our parents and friends. And so we need to be mindful, because then if we're not, we end up making the same money mistakes as our parents did, or our friends, or our spouse. And so I talk about that a lot, because especially for women, where 46% of women don't feel ready for retirement, or they're not confident in their money management skills, this is very important. So in developing your own financial identity, think about, what do I want to splurge on versus save on? What's my personal mission? What is my personal money goal? And how do I save and invest to enable myself to become more financially resilient and financially resourceful? And I talk about those two concepts a lot, because the financial resilience aspect helps us to bounce back from crises like these, like COVID-19, and things like having an emergency savings funds, having, investments are very important to becoming financially resilient. And financial resourcefulness is also very important, and having, leveraging our current salary or leveraging our current resources, whether through investing, diversifying our income streams, whether it's, doing freelancing, having passive income streams, very important for becoming financially resourceful. And we know Warren Buffett talks a lot about diversifying income streams. And we've seen in this crisis where people lose jobs, and we're dependent on one income stream, and that's a problem. So I think if we go forward thinking about those two concepts, then that's great. And in the book and in the workbook that, the Holistic Wealth Personal Workbook, there are worksheets in there to help you do that as well as worksheets to help you itemize, the debts you have owing, and other aspects that you need to, pull together in terms of planning your finances going forward.
So we're talking about resiliency, we're talking about planning. Peter, I want to ask you, what about people at different stages in their life? I think the financial situation and prospects for a new grad looks very different from someone mid-career, from someone who's just about to retire or perhaps already did just retire. Can you talk a kind of high level about how people in those different situations should be thinking about things?
Sure. Well, let's start with the people who either just retired or are planning to retire, because this was all probably a pretty frightening instance. And naturally, it's frightening from a health perspective. We don't want to discount that at all. But if we stay strictly on the financial side, you've worked your whole life and you've done all the right things, you've saved, you've earned these comforts, and you want to protect them over time. And now, even though the market has actually recovered, which I don't think anybody would have thought 50 days ago that we were going to be back to where we started before the market downturn, but that makes you, I think, even more uncertain about the future. And so having a plan in place to make the most of your existing assets and having a strategic withdrawal plan that both minimizes futures today as well as in the future can be really important. And so I think if you are more established in this, I'm going to kind of now blend it with the more established investors. If you're a more established investor or if you just retired, the most important thing, in my opinion, is to have a plan. And Keisha is talking a little bit about this. I mean, when you have a plan in place, it kind of gives you something to go back to. And when the market's swinging, you want to do something. And there's some kind of evolutionary trait in there where when we were all cave people in the jungle and we heard a rustle in the bushes, the person who stood there to calculate the probability of it being the wind versus a lion, they probably got eaten if it was a lion, whereas most people just took off. And we have that instinct to react and we want to do something. And oftentimes looking at your portfolio can be the worst place to start. And I think it's much more important to look at the inputs to a financial plan because those are things within your control. So if you're more established in your career or you have just entered retirement or you're nearing retirement and you don't have a financial plan, this is probably the time to do it. I hear countless stories of people doing all these little house projects, but you really need to get your financial house in order just so you can keep it that way forever. Now, if we're focusing more on those who are just starting out, I think anytime that stocks are down, you look at it as a sale, and you should be rooting for stocks to be going down if you're a younger investor. And younger, there's no specific age, but if you're in your 20s, in your 30s, even in your 40s, these are really great times to be an investor because you have multiple decades to let markets work themselves out. And it's always going to be tempting to try to get in and out at the right time. But if you take the time, most people are not going to take the time to be a real student of market history or market theory. But look, there is no Nobel Prize out there for anyone who knows when to time the market. And if you just get on a regular path of making automatic contributions to your investment account, to your emergency fund, those are going to be the things that sets you up for financial security and success, both in the near term and in the long term.
That's great. So we're hearing take action, whatever stage you are in your life, but the action is going to be different depending on where that is. And I'm seeing some members in the stream talking about taking action as well. Both Naomi and Evelyn are talking about making requests to get extensions on payments for car loans, student loans, take advantage of those doing forbearance. Michael says reducing expenses is a necessity to maximize cash on hand. He thinks that cutting cable, reducing cell phone plans are two great ways that his family has done to try and tighten up some of their expenses. Nicole, I think this is a great sentiment. Nicole says personal finance should be a mandatory course for students. It's important for parents to teach, but many times they don't have the objective knowledge that's needed. Keisha, that's harkening back to what you were saying. Your financial role models might not be the best role models, so it's important to have conversations like this where we can kind of broaden the scope a little bit. And Keisha, there's a question for you from Ruth in the stream. She wants to know, how do we get people back into savings mode despite these very large setbacks?
Yeah, and I know it can be very hard, especially for those who've lost jobs, to get back into savings mode, especially when we think about the debt that we might have, and we probably have accumulated through this time of maybe using a credit card or a line of credit to pay for basic expenses while we get through this period. And so it's hard once you get back into the job market, once you get a job, to start thinking immediately of saving, because you're going to be thinking about paying off debt. And paying off debt is very good. It's critical. It's the foundation. But I want to emphasize why having an emergency savings plan, having savings is very important, as well as investing, is because it's critical to make us financially resilient, like in times like these where setbacks come. And even if we pay off our debt, like I make this comparison all the time, even if we pay off our debt, but we have no savings, when this crisis hits again, we're back at square one because we have nothing in the bank account to cushion the blow. And so that's where the savings comes in, and I know people are thinking, oh, but we probably won't have a crisis like this for some time again, and maybe things will be fine for a while, and that's true. But nobody has a crystal ball, and there might be a second wave, a third wave, other fallout, in the economy that requires us to have a firm financial cushioning, and that's where the savings really comes into place.
Yeah,
it's such a great point. If I can jump in real quickly, yeah, we don't know. There's always going to be another crisis. And the one thing I think that we know from both of our work is that downturns are going to happen for any given reason. No one will know the exact reason. And entering 2020, I heard all sorts of reasons from clients, prospective clients, friends, family on why we might have a downturn. None of them involved a virus, a novel virus. And the one thing that you can count on is that you'll have the same sort of downturns and contractions in the economy with a similar magnitude and frequency as we have in the past. We just can't predict them, but you can plan for them. So I think I just wanted to jump in and think you made a wonderful point there. If you just plan on them happening, you're going to be in a better position. And someone who had mentioned, why don't we have these classes in high school or in college? I do think that would be helpful. There's research that kind of goes both ways on its helpfulness, but when you think about school, you're given a lesson, then you take a test. Whereas in life, you're given the test and then you learn the lesson. And money lessons are very expensive. So the more that you can do to just continually educate yourself, I think the better positioned you're going to be for whenever the next, whether it's market downturn or economic contraction, presents itself.
And Ruth is in the stream echoing that a bit, saying that budgeting is so important. It's a way to know what you have and what you need. Unfortunately, not many folks are really familiar with or want to do this exercise. Building off Ruth's comments, let's talk about budgeting. Is there a right way to do it, especially now when things are uncertain, when money might be tight? Is it the right time to start a budget?
Well, I'll say the one thing that I know behaviorally about budgets is that nobody likes them. Nobody likes to track your expenses, in part because it makes you look at what you've done from a spending perspective. And the way that we neurologically think of saving, and there's been scans, CAT scans, while people are looking at different scenarios, where we think of saving as identical to giving money away to a complete stranger. And so when you start looking at your expenses, that sort of reflects itself. You emphasize the now. And with budgeting, because it's so hard to do tracking of expenses, I highly recommend people using some sort of fintech app. I'm a really big user of mint.com. I'm also part of a financial wellness company called Bright Plan, where we have a wonderful budgeting tool. And my feeling is if you are in a stable job and your finances are in a good place, rather than tracking expenses, I think it's more important to go through a process I call reverse budgeting, where you list out your goals, figure out what sort of monthly savings you have to make to meet those goals over 1 year, 3 year, 5 years, and then just automate those savings and spend the rest. Now, be very clear, this is not a great strategy if you have a hard time keeping your checking account above zero, or if you have issues with making late payments. But if you're in a financially secure position, I'm really a big fan of reverse budgeting, because by focusing on what you need to save, it's something within your control, and it's a little more realistic. You don't have to track a budget every day, every week. When you think of good financial habits, you have to do things that are easy, because we as humans have all these flaws that are going to make something like daily expense management very, very difficult. That being said, there's a lot of great technology that wasn't out here a decade ago that makes this so much easier today than it was in the past for us to be successful.
Thank you, Peter. Keisha, tell me, anything to add there with the concept of holistic wealth and resiliency in mind for that budgeting conversation?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Those are really good points. And I just wanted to add that when we think about holistic wealth, we're thinking about living intentionally by design. So holistic wealth is all about being intentional. In the book I wrote that we make 36,000 decisions per day, every day. And most of us make those decisions mindlessly because we're creatures of habit. We go about our days, we get our coffee, we go into work, then we buy lunch, and then we might be coming home, and then we stop and we buy dinner. And so it adds up. And so that's one way the budgeting actually helps us be intentional, being controlled, and being more mindful of our decisions. And we're bombarded every single day. I mean, advertisers play on the fact that we're being mindless, and they hope that we're being mindless, so that when they advertise, we just run out and buy. And so we really have to get intentional. And one way to get intentional about our spending is to create and really track that budget and track our spending, and really being mindful that everything, whether it's going out, hanging out with friends for dinner, everything represents either an addition or a depletion to our holistic wealth bank accounts. And so when we think about, the reverse budgeting, like Peter made that point, and it's a wonderful point because it's true. We have to think, so is this an addition or is this a depletion from my holistic wealth bank account? And how is that affecting my long-term goals if I take this action, no matter how small it is? Will it compromise my ability to achieve that goal? And so that's one way that budgeting really helps us.
Thank you. And we have Jesse in the stream saying that they love Google budgets in their family, fast and really easy. I want to get to a couple kind of nitty-gritty tactical questions. Peter, I want to talk about unemployment for a moment. We're hearing a lot of people in the US here having trouble getting through to the unemployment line. Is there anything else that they could be doing? If they do receive benefits, can they be doing anything additionally? And what about people who might be making the choice right now between staying on unemployment or going back to a job that might not pay them as much as they're receiving in the benefit?
Well, I think what makes joblessness a little bit more unusual today than in perhaps past recessions is that we've all been trapped inside our home. And so one of the first things that, I will give advice when someone's looking for jobs is, hey, just network like crazy. And so that looks a lot different today. You do need to be actively reaching out to people, let them know what you're up to, let them know what you're looking for. And, the good thing, let's try to find the good thing. If you've lost your job, that's obviously a horrible, most likely not a great instance. We'll assume it's horrible, but what are some things that you didn't like about your job that you wish you could be doing? And I think clearly defining what it is you want and letting your network understand the type of role you're looking for and the things that you do well and how they would fit with their company, that's going to, accelerate the process. And I do think that there are certain industries that are hiring more than others. And you can be passionate, I think, about certain areas that maybe weren't directly tied to your industry before, but you have relatable enough skills and you know that there are more hiring in a lot of areas of the economy that there have been in the past. So if you were coming out of hospitality, maybe you're looking towards something that is more serving of services that help people who are staying at home all the time. And just connecting those dots, I think that can be really beneficial. In many ways, it's not all that different than what you would do in normal times. It's just being more intentional with your time in a more digital age than ever is really important.
Thank you. And Keisha, another thing that we're hearing is people considering not paying their rent. Do you have any thoughts on that? Is that a sound strategy given this dire time, or is that not a path you want to start down?
Yeah, it's funny. I've been hearing a lot of that, and while I get the financial strain right now with those of us who've lost jobs, and we're thinking about how to prioritize, we're thinking about what to pay, what to hold back on. And of course, when this started, we saw the hashtags of the rent strikes and the pressures on landlords to just have a rent freeze or rent holiday. I think it's important to negotiate. I think it's important to keep the lines of communication open with your landlord. And I think it's important to pay what you can. I don't think it's necessarily a good strategy to pull back in full, to close the lines of communication and just act as if it doesn't exist. I think we need to do what we can to keep, because it is an amount owing. So it is a debt. So we need to think about it like a debt and plan to pay for it. And the way we would call up our banks to negotiate, the way we would call up our utility companies to negotiate, it's the same way I think we should call up our landlords to negotiate. And just to say, hey, this is my situation, but here's what I can afford right now, and here's when I think I can get you the rest, so that we keep those relationships. I talk about relationships a lot in Holistic Wealth. It's a whole section in the book, and it's very important because relationships add to our Holistic Wealth bank account. And this is a very critical relationship. This is the roof over our heads, and so one not to jeopardize. So I think it's useful to open those lines of communication, pay what we can, and if we can afford to pay in full, pay in full. That way we're reducing that outstanding balance that we'd have to pay at the end of all of this. Because right now, everything is just compounding. It's just like compound interest. And, I've heard about waves of evictions that will happen after this. And I'm sure many of us don't want to get stuck there.
Thank you for those thoughts, Keisha. I think that probably helps that subject feel more approachable to people. You're not just staring in the face of either being asked to pay something that you absolutely can't or not paying it at all and dealing with those consequences. I think that's a nice sentiment of keep the communication open, pay what you can, maintain the relationship. Peter, I want to ask you about, we talked about deferring student loans, mortgage payments, etc. For people looking into that, are there any things that they should keep in mind? Those payments are going to come back due at some point. How should they be managing through that process if they're able to use some of those benefits?
Well, I think one thing, for example, federal student loans, interest payments you can delay. And let's say you have a job and you're just going to delay them just to delay them. Maybe have a plan for what you're going to do with that extra money. So I mentioned how great an opportunity it is to invest when markets are down. And I think if you can anytime you can find money, anytime the government can subsidize your saving in some ways, that is something you should be taking advantage of. And so if you're doing it out of financial hardship, I think it's really important, and this point was just made, that you have to remember that's going to be in your monthly cash flow when this all comes back. But again, if you are in a better financial position and you are taking the free pass on a monthly payment or on interest payments, and there's not going to be any impact to your credit score, finding some goals that you can fill up a little bit more quickly is really impactful. And so if you're not maxing out your company retirement plan, for example, or if you're fortunate to have access to an employee stock purchase plan or some sort of executive compensation, non-traditional salary compensation, those are real opportunities. And anytime you have the debt payments, I know some people feel like they want to get out of debt as quickly as possible. Others feel like, it's just part of my lifestyle. I think it's kind of going back to the point where you look at it within the framework of a financial plan, it can help you make some of those decisions of investing versus paying down debt or saving for your kids' college. Some people are saving for their kids' college before they've paid off their own student debts. And so, I would encourage those people to remember that your kids can take a loan. You can't take a loan for retirement. So trying to make sure that your financial house is in order. Again, I mentioned Wealth Worksheets. Wealth Worksheets has some kind of resources that you can go to for free and help you clear up some of these decisions.
I'm just pondering that as someone with kids and student loans. Oscar in the stream is talking about, echoing your sentiments about reverse budgeting. Camilla is also saying that, yes, being intentional about wealth building is very important. Be mindful. Alfred says networking is key. Back to your points earlier, Peter. People do business with people they know, like, and trust. It's been really wonderful speaking with you both. The last comment I want to leave you with is from Johannes, who says this has been an excellent program. Thank you for saying that. A recession is cyclical and everyone is in the same boat, but you need to understand your current situation, understand your needs and goals, seek help from professionals, and educate yourself every single day. Peter, Keisha, thank you for helping to educate me and everyone joining in the stream today. It's been really wonderful talking with you.
And thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
And thank you all for joining. This is Business Unusual. It is LinkedIn's live show where we talk about the changing nature of work. Those were our financial experts today, Keisha Blair and Peter Lazaroff. We come to you live 5 days a week from the LinkedIn news page. Tomorrow, I will be back for a discussion about cities post-COVID and post all of the unrest that we are seeing in the US. Are there opportunities to build things back more thoughtfully, more equitably? I hope to see you then. Until then, have a great night. Stay safe.